FinCrime Unfiltered is proudly supported by Hummingbird. Hummingbird is a modern compliance platform designed to make financial crime investigations smarter, faster, and more effective. Because today's financial criminals are sophisticated, savvy, and agile, meaning the tools used to fight them should be too. Learn more at hummingbird.co. Hello and welcome to episode 20 of FinCrime Unfiltered. I'm Sarah Beth Felix. Today is September 11th as I'm recording this. And so I wanted to, kind of talk a little bit about that. But, I think for all of us, it's been a busy week. It's been a little bit of a heavy week if you've looked at any of the news. As someone with a great appreciation for the Socratic method, both of learning and of teaching, I think it's an alarming time when open dialogue and exchange of ideas, even conflicting ideas and beliefs, turn into taking the life of somebody. And I think on the heels of September 11th, it is a reminder of the broken condition of mankind and those who use our financial system for illicit purposes. They want to disrupt and destroy our freedom, our way of life in this great country. And the diligence that we have in finding those who perpetuate crimes, whether it's yesterday's shooter, the terrorists of September 11th, those who launder funds, those who traffic children, the scourge of the earth, essentially, when they are laundering funds through our financial system, it's far more than a compliance issue. It's a public safety issue. It's a personal freedoms issue. And so thank you to all of you who are busting your tail to keep up with your key performance indicators and whatever other metric that your board has put on you and your group. I know there's things that keep you up at night, and I know it's never a surface level issue. So please take a moment to remember this week, especially the why in what you do, and let us never lose sight of that why. So thank you again for all your work. Little by little, SAR by SAR, each one of us are making a difference and trying to, help our law enforcement partners find those who want to destroy and disrupt our way of life. So 24 years ago, on September 11th, I had just landed in Bucharest in Romania. I was working with a nonprofit run by some dear friends, and we were focused on the overflow of orphans in both private and government-run organizations throughout Romania. And of course, this was before we had cell phones. We landed, we were actually one of the last planes to land before the global ground stop took over. We flew out of Charles de Gaulle. We landed in Bucharest. Our contacts there came and got us. They ushered us to a building. We had no clue what was going on, right? We didn't have our phones or anything because we didn't have phones. And we had to sit in a room, secure room, and watch from thousands of miles away as the planes hit the towers and then the eventual collapse. And it was a tough time, of course, and I'm sure we all have those stories. The day that 9/11 happened and where we were and what we were doing. And I know being in Romania, being so far away and so cut off, we knew that we were there for a purpose, that there was a time for why we were one of the last planes to be able to land. And so we got to work and we got to love on a whole bunch of kids around Romania. We got to work, contribute, kind of like distract ourselves a little bit from the unknown. But one of the things that stood out for me, and when I look back at the last 24 years of my career, would be the level of corruption. And this was my first taste of corruption. When we were in Romania, they were barely a decade out of the dictator of Nicolae Ceausescu. And knowing what he put the Romanian people through and the corruption and what happened to their financial system and their infrastructure and the years it has taken, decades it's taken to recover from that. Now Romania is a gorgeous place and it's well run. It's a member, I believe, of the EU. it's quite a different place than it was 24 years ago when I was there. But the reason why I talk about this is not just because it's September 11th, but because there are certain, I think, guideposts in our life, right? When we look back and we say, oh, this was something I remember, not, something I remember kind of adding to my personal flame or my personal fire of my career. And that time in Romania was certainly that. Walking through state-run orphanages, watching these kids that have no health care, no cribs, no food, no anything because of the level of corruption by the government, really leaves, a great mark on someone, especially, someone in their early 20s, right out of college at the time. And so if you've ever seen any of my LinkedIn posts, I talk about corruption a lot, and I talk about how it bothers me that in the United States, that we're one of the only countries that doesn't actually consider our own political persons and parties as somebody who's higher risk, as a group that's higher risk or prone to corruption, like we do everyone else's politicians in every other country. And I have a big, strong fairness thing, right? Like, I like justice and I like things to be fair. And I think it's unfair when the U.S. Refuses to label our own politicians at any level, right? From the mayor to, our congressmen and women and senators and president, whoever holds those roles, we should all be held to the same standard and all, be subjected to enhanced due diligence. And so, while that's a small part of my time in Romania, it left a big mark because you're walking through and seeing people's lives that were materially impacted by severe corruption. And so that's my story about September 11th. If you ever need anyone to tell your story or to tell your story too, I'd love to hear it. You can always email us at FinCrime Unfiltered at illicitedge.com, FinCrime Unfiltered at illicitedge.com. And I'd love to hear your story. I love asking people in person, like, hey, was there something about September 11th, especially in our industry? Was there something about September 11th that changed the course of your career? And for me, this trip to Romania and September 11th really did change the course of my career. And I've never looked back. And I'm very grateful to be here working with all of you all. So, all right, getting on to some takeaways for the busy week that we've had. There is, let's see, I think it's been 6 days. Only 4 working days, but 6 days, and FinCEN has been busy. They issued guidance on cross-border information sharing from U.S. financial institutions to non-U.S. financial institutions. They issued a notice on financial sextortion. They issued a modified geographical targeting order, a GTO, for southwest border. And also they had Director Gacki give her testimony before a hearing earlier this week. And that's, I would say, this should be the pace of FinCEN. I think we're all kind of drinking from a fire hose because we haven't really had this type of pace from FinCEN ever. And I do appreciate when FinCEN is highly communicative. I think as a person who's highly communicative, I appreciate it when the FIU is also in that manner. And I don't know if it's because there's so many changes going on behind the scenes with the change in administration. I don't know if it's because they now feel more freedom to do so, or they're getting more pressure to do so. I couldn't quite tell. And watching that interview, seeing Jim Richards' take on it, which if you haven't read that, I would suggest you do, because he kind of, puts it in kind of a 30,000 foot level in terms of the breadth of her interview and the things that she said. There was, I think it was a little bit of a nothing burger in her overall testimony. There was nothing, I think, that was game changing or leading to anything. I know there's been rumors about, this next week, the Treasury announcing, this or that. And I'm not going to talk about those rumors specifically because I think it's a distraction, and I think we already have a big enough workload as it is. So I wanted to get into some of the takeaways from some of the things that FinCEN did make public officially this week. So the first one I wanted to tackle was the notice on financially motivated sextortion. Allison Jimenez is my go-to when it comes to tracking the scourge that is financial sextortion. She's posted a lot about it over the last 18 months to 24 months. She's been just diving into that world and pulling out financials, especially from the crypto space. And so if you need more information about how big this problem is and somebody who's taken a lot of time to define it, please go check out her LinkedIn. She's posted a lot about it, especially since FinCEN posted. But I also did post some takeaways, mine or more, for financial institutions. I think one of the biggest takeaways is, again, if your financial institution does not have a nimble anti-money laundering monitoring solution that allows you to operationalize and test in a sandbox the transactional or customer threat landscape that you have to see the applicability of any of these things that come out from FinCEN, whether it's a notice, guidance, advisory, please start looking to change that now. I do not see this pace stopping. While they may not have, 4 big things in 6 days, I don't think that pace is going to continue, but I do think that what we've seen from FinCEN will continue in terms of the advisories and the guidance. And I know I say this a lot. I sound like a broken record because I am. But if you're relying on your AML system vendor to be effective in this, it's not going to happen because your institution is so different from the institution across the street from you, even if you're around the same asset size. Your threat landscapes are typically very different, which means that you have to have a nimble monitoring tool that you can look at these red flags that are in all of these documents from FinCEN and go, hey, I need to see how applicable is this? I need to run it in a sandbox and see, is this going to lead me to anything that I should be filing a SAR on? And then put it into production. But if you don't have that ability, then these advisories and these guidance documents that come out from FinCEN really are just a memo, right? They're just basically a memo to file for you. And then you just kind of move on with, dispositioning thousands and thousands and thousands of false positive alerts. And I would encourage you to take a beat and make sure that you're not putting yourself or putting your financial institution in a position where under the next administration specifically, where they will ask you, hey, can you show us the number of SARs that you filed for this advisory or this guidance document that came out? And it's a big fat goose egg because your AML system doesn't allow you to operationalize them. So if you need any recommendations, I do have a very short list of trusted AML systems that I've kicked the tires many, many times on. There is zero compensation tied to any of my recommendations because as soon as I take a penny from them, then it clouds exactly what I'm telling you that it is good for you because of this, that, and the other. So if you do reach out on LinkedIn, I Follow Dirty Money, or at our email address, FinCrime Unfiltered at illicitedge.com. If you do reach out, I will ask you a few questions because I can't tell you who, the top 2 that I would recommend if I don't know a little bit more about your financial institution. But I think if you haven't started that process, you need to now, especially given the advisory that came out regarding financially motivated sextortion. So I think the other big takeaway from this, there's some glaring issues that for me just keep coming up in almost every advisory and guidance document that comes, and it's not necessarily a FinCEN issue. It is a congressional issue. And that is where we do have these advisories as guidance documents, but it's hard to fully operationalize them because of our nascent regulatory environment. And I talk about this a lot. I write about it. I have for over a decade. We have trillions of dollars that flow throughout the U.S. without AML eyeballs, both in the payment processor space as well as the money services space, the P2P space, MSBs, remittances. And while those are regulated, right, while some of those transactions are regulated in an MSB environment, we have CIP-esque, if you will, triggers based off of dollar amounts, which means that the dollar amount that they brought up specifically in this advisory regarding sextortion goes without any type of CIP requirements because the dollar amount is so low. And I think that's an issue, right? The fact that people can send money under a threshold of, under a $3,000 threshold, or, have other transactions in the prepaid card space, for under $1,000, depending on the type of card and the way in which the card can be used, the CIP threshold does not get triggered until later, or till a higher transaction amount, and that's a problem. And I think, especially given the dollar amounts that they talk about in this advisory. So I think, again, it just highlights some of the holes that we have that I don't see closing anytime soon, unfortunately. But I think if you're a prepaid card issuer, this advisory, and I don't care what space of a prepaid card type of industry that you're in. I know with working with fintechs over the years, there's been a lot of different, right? There's just like a rainbow flavor of prepaid card companies, whether it's earned wage access or, rewards or benefits or payouts for something. There's a prepaid card company, there's a host of them. And I think it's super important that you take a look at this advisory, especially when they talk about in several sections about how prepaid cards are used oftentimes for the offload of the sextortion that happens to the person who's actually conducting this crime. And I would recommend, because this isn't new, financial sextortion is not new. It's been around for several years. So if you are a large prepaid card company and you've never filed a SAR for something that may look like this, I would encourage you to start, doing your own self-imposed look back to make sure that you don't have anything hiding in the shadows from the last year or two. The other thing that FinCEN did this week is they updated the Southwest Border GTO from $200 to $1,000. And of course, these numbers are still far below the CIP-esque trigger for most MSBs. And I think it's important that whether or not you are a standalone MSB, if you are a branch of an MSB, I know that the burden is big, right? Like when these changes, when that $200 first came out several weeks ago, it was very shocking, very jarring, because it's not as easy, right? It's not like there's one line of code and instead of it being 10,000, it went down to 200. No, that's not the extent of it. And this is something that I think is needs to have more play at FinCEN before they roll these things out. And I don't know. I don't envy MSBs that are in this space that then, change all their programming to go down to 200 and had to, put all these controls in place to make sure that they have enough information to file a complete CTR. And then now it went from 200 to 1,000. I think I would hope that we, going forward, have a little bit more, a little less haste in issuing a few of these. And I think in a dream world, it would be great to not have these things publicly known. If they are an MSB and they're registered with FinCEN, then that means that they have access to a secure site at FinCEN, which means that FinCEN should be pushing down these new requirements in a secret manner I know I've talked about this before, but as a basketball player my entire life, my dad always told me, don't telegraph your pass, right? Don't look where you're going to throw the ball because it's, someone's going to pick you off. I mean, it's going to happen. And it happened a lot. And, this happens in football too. It's not just basketball, but you don't telegraph your pass. And that's one of the things that I think we keep doing. And so while I do appreciate the advisories and all of the communication from FinCEN, like I said earlier, there's a big part of me that wishes that these were secret, right? That these were treated akin to, but not necessarily exactly like the 314A list, where only those in the know, only those that need to know. And I wonder how much more effective it would be if we didn't publish it for the masses. That's just kind of my dream. All right, then the cross-border sharing guidance that they also published a few days ago. I loved it at first, right? I'm trying to find positive things. I'm generally a happy, grateful person. And so when this came out from FinCEN, I was like, yes, because they had a list of like, hey, this is an example of what's kosher, and this is an example of what's not kosher on their list. And I thought, oh, this is great. I love that, right? That's something I've long pushed for, is how a lot of other FIUs write, which is, this is not an all-inclusive list, but this is a starter list of particular situations in which this is good or this is bad. And I really appreciated that. So that was my big positive thing I saw from that guidance document that came out. The second thing that came to mind was how there was that advisory last summer, I believe, regarding the Mexico timeshare joint notice. And I remember a few of us having this like head shaking moment, because in that guidance, they talked about how US and non-US FIs could share information. And I remember we were all like, wait, what? Did we miss something? Have I been totally out of it the last 20 years? I don't understand this. And so I don't know if this guidance was issued to support that earlier statement from last summer. I don't know. But I think it's important that your institution does not operationalize this, which is funny because I'm all about operationalizing everything that comes out from FinCEN. But this particular one, some very smart legal minds in my group, Natalie Loebner and Jim Richards, brought up some major concerns, right? Some major holes that they saw when they read this. I'm not a lawyer. I rely on much smarter people than me to have that gut check, have that legal gut check about something. So while this guidance document, says that you need policies and procedures and kind of gives you a rough outline of what to do and what not to do, or what information you should share, what information you shouldn't share, I think it goes much broader than that, because then you're dealing with other countries and other privacy laws. So I would proceed with great caution before you start operationalizing this cross-border sharing of information. All right, almost at time. Finally, this is not a FinCEN thing, but yesterday on the 10th, the OCC's Jonathan Gould, he made a statement. I was reading through his financial Stability Oversight Council, something, I'm sure I got that wrong. And there was a statement that stuck out to me when I was reading through his prepared remarks. And then last night I was scrolling through LinkedIn and I saw that the OCC decided to publish the very quote that I took issue with when I was reading his prepared remarks. And it's something that I think is unfortunate. I would say his prepared remarks as a whole focused on community banks and focused on how some of the regulations, capitalization and things like that are unfair and need to be less of a burden for community banks. And I could not agree more. I do believe community banks need to have a separate structure from what they use across all OCC national banks. But I took issue with one quote, and I want to read it because I don't want to mess it up. But it's on the OCC LinkedIn page because they put the quote out there. It says, "We have begun reviewing supervisory strategies across banks of all sizes with the goal of eliminating ongoing or targeted examination activities that are not related to material financial risks, thus shrinking the burden on banks posed by our exam activities, document information requests, and the like." And the big part of that made me, kind of have like a not good shiver was that they're focusing on material financial risks, which means everything else is not going to be part of an exam, or it's going to be like I've seen in many of my OCC client banks already, where they're getting an exam request list, and the exam request list asks for their independent audit and a copy of their policy and procedures, and that is it. That is the only question that they're asked. And while I'm kind of happy, sad about this, definitely more sad than happy. Like, I'm glad that some of the banks are going to have a little bit more fair time, right? Like a couple of them have had super unfair audits, exams, sorry, not audits. The other part of me that's sad about this is it's giving the impression, and it will continue to give the impression to bank management, that AML risks are immaterial, which again makes my head hurt, because also this administration is focused on the fentanyl crisis and finding transnational criminal organizations and getting them out of the U.S. and finding these front companies and these shell companies that are linked to the cartel. How do we do that if we are gutting AML and not just the CTA, right? We've already talked about that ad nauseum, but now we're basically telling financial institutions, the gatekeepers to the financial system, AML is not really important because it's not a material financial risk. And I think that's dangerous, because the things that happen over the next 3.5 years, you will be held accountable for under the next administration, because things will be different under the next administration. And I don't know. I'm not sure what the fix is for this. If you are an AML officer and you are at an OCC bank, I am glad that the pressure's off just a little bit. My concern is not with that. My concern is with the messaging to executive management and the board, because that trickle down effect, and I've seen it in 2 different clients very recently, where they're starting to leach resources from the AML area, because the message to executive management and the board is AML is just kind of a set and forget it. I literally feel like we're going back 20 years to the first iteration of the exam manual. So I guess the fix for this is, like, it would be great for all federal banking agencies, including the NCUA, to make just a blanket statement. Hey, like, while we are shoring up things on other examination priorities, and we've talked about, financial risks and all this kind of stuff, please don't forget that this administration is also focused on getting rid of cartels and TCOs and fentanyl. And the only way we can do that is if all financial institutions of all sizes and all types have effective AML programs. And a blanket statement like that, I think, would go really far. And it would give support to an AML officer, where they don't have to then start fighting to not lose people or technology or budgets or training budgets. So not necessarily a positive note to end on, but just something to look out for. As they said, they're revamping different things. And so that'll be something that I'll be watching for. And of course, once they make it public and known, then I will be giving my breakdown. But so I hope this episode, I know, was a little different. I gave you a little bit of a personal side because of September 11th, but I want to say thank you to all our first responders. Thank you to the military, all of the families that have sacrificed so much over the years for our freedoms. And this is the end of episode 20. And please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you need anything, you can reach us at FinCrime Unfiltered at illicitedge.com, or I Follow Dirty Money on LinkedIn. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.